Sutra 1. Here follows instruction in union. Union, here as always in the scriptures of India, means union of the individual soul with the Oversoul, of the personal consciousness with the divine consciousness, whereby the mortal becomes immortal and enters the eternal. Therefore salvation is, first, freedom from sin and the sorrow which comes from sin, and then a divine and eternal well-being, wherein the soul partakes of the being, the wisdom, and glory of God. Sutra 2. Union, spiritual consciousness, is gained through control of the versatile psychic nature. The goal is the full consciousness of the spiritual man, illumined by the divine light. Nothing except the obdurate resistance of the psychic nature keeps us back from the goal. The psychical powers are spiritual powers run wild, perverted, drawn from their proper channel. Therefore, our first task is to regain control of this perverted nature, to chasten, purify, and restore the misplaced powers. Sutra 3. Then the seer comes to consciousness in his proper nature. Egotism is but the perversion of spiritual being. Ambition is the inversion of spiritual power. Passion is the distortion of love. The mortal is the limitation of the immortal. When these false images give place to true, then the spiritual man stands forth luminous as the sun when the clouds disperse. Sutra 4. Heretofore the seer has been enmeshed in the activities of the psychic nature. The power and life which are the heritage of the spiritual man have been caught and enmeshed in psychical activities. Instead of pure being in the divine, there has been fretful, combative egotism, its hand against every man. Instead of the light of pure vision, there have been restless senses and imaginings. Instead of spiritual joy, the undivided joy of pure being, there has been self-indulgence of body and mind. These are all real forces, but distorted from their true nature and goal. They must be extricated, like gems from the matrix, like the pith from the reed, steadily, without destructive violence. Spiritual powers are to be drawn forth from the psychic meshes. Sutra 5. The psychic activities are 5. They are either subject or not subject to the 5 hindrances. See Book 2, Sutra 3. The psychic nature is built up through the image-making power, the power which lies behind and dwells in mind pictures. These pictures do not remain quiescent in the mind. They are kinetic, restless, stimulating to new acts. Thus, the mind image of an indulgence suggests and invites to a new indulgence. The picture of past joy is framed in regrets or hopes. And there is the ceaseless play of the desire to know, to penetrate to the essence of things, to classify. This, too, busies itself ceaselessly with the mind images. So that we may classify the activities of the psychic nature thus. Sutra 6. These activities are sound intellection, unsound intellection, predication, sleep, memory. We have here a list of mental and emotional powers, of powers that picture and observe, and of powers that picture and feel. But the power to know and feel is spiritual and immortal. What is needed is not to destroy it, but to raise it from the psychical to the spiritual realm. Sutra 7. The elements of sound intellection are direct observation, inductive reason, and trustworthy testimony. Each of these is a spiritual power, thinly veiled. Direct observation is the outermost form of the soul's pure vision. Inductive reason rests on the great principles of continuity and correspondence, and these on the supreme truth that all life is of the One. Trustworthy testimony, the sharing of one soul in the wisdom of another, rests on the ultimate oneness of all souls. Sutra 8. Unsound intellection is false understanding, not resting on a perception of the true nature of things. When the object is not truly perceived, when the observation is inaccurate and faulty, thought or reasoning based on that mistaken perception is of necessity false and unsound. Sutra 9. Predication is carried on through words or thoughts not resting on an object perceived. The purpose of this sutra is to distinguish between the mental process of predication and observation, induction, or testimony. Predication is the attribution of a quality or action to a subject by adding to it a predicate. In the sentence, "The man is wise," the man is the subject. "Is wise" is the predicate. This may be simply an interplay of thoughts, without the presence of the object thought of, or the things thought of may be imaginary or unreal, while observation, induction, and testimony always go back to an object. Sutra 10. Sleep is the psychic condition which rests on mind states, all material things being absent. In waking life we have two currents of perception, an outer current of physical things seen and heard and perceived, an inner current of mind images and thoughts. The outer current ceases in sleep. The inner current continues, and watching the mind images float before the fields of consciousness, we dream. Even when there are no dreams, there is still a certain consciousness in sleep, so that on waking one says, "I have slept well," or "I have slept badly." Sutra 11. Memory is holding to mind images of things perceived without modifying them. Here, as before, the mental power is explained in terms of mind images, which are the material of which the psychic world is built. Therefore the sages teach that the world of our perception, which is indeed a world of mind images, is but the wraith or shadow of the real and everlasting world. In this sense, memory is but the psychical inversion of the spiritual, ever-present vision. That which is ever before the spiritual eye of the seer needs not to be remembered. Sutra 12. The control of these psychic activities comes through the right use of the will and through ceasing from self-indulgence. If these psychical powers and energies, even such evil things as passion and hate and fear, are but spiritual powers fallen and perverted, how are we to bring about their release and restoration? Two means are presented to us: the awakening of the spiritual will and the purification of mind and thought. Sutra 13. The right use of the will is the steady effort to stand in spiritual being. We have thought of ourselves, perhaps, as creatures moving upon this earth rather helpless, at the mercy of storm and hungers and our enemies. We are to think of ourselves as immortals, dwelling in the light, encompassed and sustained by spiritual powers. This steady effort to hold this thought will awaken dormant and unrealized powers, which will unveil to us the nearness of the eternal. Sutra 14. This becomes a firm resting place when followed long, persistently, with earnestness. We must seek spiritual life in conformity with the laws of spiritual life, with earnestness, humility, gentle charity, which is an acknowledgment of the one soul within us all. Only through obedience to that shared life, through perpetual remembrance of our oneness with all divine being, our nothingness apart from divine being, can we enter our inheritance. Sutra 15. Ceasing from self-indulgence is conscious mastery over the thirst for sensuous pleasure, here or hereafter. Rightly understood, the desire for sensation is the desire of being, the distortion of the soul's eternal life. The lust of sensual stimulus and excitation rests on the longing to feel one's life keenly, to gain the sense of being really alive. This sense of true life comes only with the coming of the soul, and the soul comes only in silence, after self-indulgence has been courageously and loyally stilled through reverence before the coming soul. Sutra 16. The consummation of this is freedom from thirst for any mode of psychical activity, through the establishment of the spiritual man. In order to gain a true understanding of this teaching, study must be supplemented by devoted practice, faith by works. The reading of the words will not avail. There must be a real effort to stand as the soul, a real ceasing from self-indulgence. With the awakening of the spiritual will and purification will come at once the growth of the spiritual man and our awakening consciousness as the spiritual man, and this, attained in even a small degree, will help us notably in our contest. To him that hath shall be given. Sutra 17. Meditation with an object follows these stages. First, exterior examining, then interior judicial action, then joy, then realization of individual being. In the practice of meditation, a beginning may be made by fixing the attention upon some external object, such as a sacred image or picture, or a part of a book of devotion. In the second stage, one passes from the outer object to an inner pondering upon its lessons. The third stage is the inspiration, the heightening of the spiritual will which results from this pondering. The fourth stage is the realization of one's spiritual being, as enkindled by this meditation. Sutra 18. After the exercise of the will has stilled the psychic activities, meditation rests only on the fruit of former meditations. In virtue of continued practice and effort, the need of an external object on which to rest the meditation is outgrown. An interior state of spiritual consciousness is reached, which is called the cloud of things knowable. See Book 4, Sutra 29. Sutra 19. Subjective consciousness, arising from a natural cause, is possessed by those who have laid aside their bodies and been absorbed into subjective nature. Those who have died, entered the paradise between births, are in a condition resembling meditation without an external object. But in the fullness of time, the seeds of desire in them will spring up, and they will be born again into this world. Sutra 20. For the others, there is spiritual consciousness led up to by faith, valor, right mindfulness, one-pointedness, perception. It is well to keep in mind these steps on the path to illumination: faith, valor, right mindfulness, one-pointedness, perception. Not one can be dispensed with. All must be one. First faith, and then from faith, valor, from valor, right mindfulness, from right mindfulness, a one-pointed aspiration toward the soul, from this, perception, and finally, full vision as the soul. Sutra 21. Spiritual consciousness is nearest to those of keen, intense will. The image used is the swift impetus of the torrent. The kingdom must be taken by force. Firm will comes only through effort. Effort is inspired by faith. The great secret is this: it is not enough to have intuitions. We must act on them. We must live them. Sutra 22. The will may be weak, or of middle strength, or intense. Therefore, there is a spiritual consciousness higher than this. For those of weak will, there is this counsel: to be faithful in obedience, to live the life, and thus to strengthen the will to more perfect obedience. The will is not ours, but God's, and we come into it only through obedience. As we enter into the Spirit of God, we are permitted to share the power of God. Higher than the 3 stages of the way is the goal, the end of the way. Sutra 23. Or, spiritual consciousness may be gained by ardent service of the Master. If we think of our lives as tasks laid upon us by the Master of Life, if we look on all duties as parts of that Master's work entrusted to us, and forming our life work, then if we obey, promptly, loyally, sincerely, we shall enter by degrees into the Master's life, and share the Master's power. Thus we shall be initiated into the spiritual will. Sutra 24. The Master is the spiritual man who is free from hindrances, bondage to works, and the fruition and seed of works. The soul of the Master, the Lord, is of the same nature as the soul in us. But we still bear the burden of many evils. We are in bondage through our former works. We are under the dominance of sorrow. The soul of the Master is free from sin and servitude and sorrow. Sutra 25. In the Master is the perfect seed of omniscience. The soul of the Master is in essence one with the Oversoul, and therefore partaker of the Oversoul's all wisdom and all power. All spiritual attainment rests on this, and is possible because the soul and the Oversoul are one. Sutra 26. He is the teacher of all who have gone before, since he is not limited by time. From the beginning, the Oversoul has been the teacher of all souls, which, by their entrance into the Oversoul, by realizing their oneness with the Oversoul, have inherited the kingdom of the light. For the Oversoul is before time, and time, father of all else, is one of his children. Sutra 27. His word is Om. Om, the symbol of the 3 in 1, the 3 worlds in the soul, the 3 times, past, present, future in eternity, the 3 divine powers, creation, preservation, transformation, in the one being, the 3 essences, immortality, omniscience, joy, in the one Spirit. This is the word, the symbol, of the Master and Lord, the perfected spiritual man. Sutra 28. Let there be soundless repetition of Om, and meditation thereon. This has many meanings in ascending degrees. There is first the potency of the word itself, as of all words. Then there is the manifold significance of the symbol, as suggested above. Lastly, there is the spiritual realization of the high essences thus symbolized. Thus we rise step by step to the eternal. Sutra 29. Thence come the awakening of interior consciousness and the removal of barriers. Here again, faith must be supplemented by works. The life must be led as well as studied before the full meaning can be understood. The awakening of spiritual consciousness can only be understood in measure as it is entered. It can only be entered where the conditions are present: purity of heart, and strong aspiration, and the resolute conquest of each sin. This, however, may easily be understood, that the recognition of the three worlds as resting in the soul leads us to realize ourselves and all life as of the soul, that as we dwell not in past, present, or future, but in the eternal, we become more at one with the eternal, that as we view all organization, preservation, mutation, as the work of the Divine One, we shall come more into harmony with the One, and thus remove the barrier in our path toward the light. In the second part of the first book, the problem of the emergence of the spiritual man is further dealt with. We are led to the consideration of the barriers to his emergence, of the overcoming of the barriers, and of certain steps and stages in the ascent from the ordinary consciousness of practical life to the finer, deeper, radiant consciousness of the spiritual man.